Mom is waking up.
She's not picking up the
Picking up
call
right
because
now.
I
Okay,
don't have
maybe.
the, yeah.
She'll probably join in a bit. So we will start recording now.
All right.
And I will say I will just say some things, then what the intention of this call is, and then now I will ask Alan to some questions. Can everybody put this on mute, please?
Make sure that when Mom comes in, that you let everybody know, because it's very, very important when the mom in charge of our world comes in. We all need to know that. So I want to make sure we acknowledge her when she comes in. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay. I think she'll appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Christian, you can start recording. Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in and taking your time out to be with us. I'm just feeling so, it's like a family. That's like the first family. It's just so beautiful to see all of your faces. It's just nothing better than this in the whole world, truly. So I just wanted to do this with Alan because 3 years ago, I met him, nearly 3 years ago, November 2017, so less than 3 years. And I've just had this amazing experience, this very beautiful story. You know, we love stories in this group, don't we? So this beautiful story in my Sikh culture, where this one a sailor, his boat is in the storm, and he says, if I find my true guru, then I'm gonna, please, true guru, please, is Guru Nanak's soul still here? If I find that true guru, I'm gonna offer him 50 some money, and if he recognizes it, then I'm gonna say, this is my true guru, and that's Guru Nanak's soul. So that's the measure, like that's the a pointer he put on, but his request was that he can survive the storm. So he survives the storm. Now his next quest is to find his true guru. So he goes in on this quest and keep looking. And in this time in Punjab, there were many fake gurus. So he keeps going around and around, and eventually he finds this true guru, where he thought that was Guru Nanak's soul. And after he finds this true guru, he goes with the drum rolls that I found the guru, I found the true person. So this is the kind of feeling I get. Maybe it's a quirky story, but that's how I feel about Alan, and the true human being that who we can trust, who talks the talks and also walks the talk. And so I absolutely admire that. That's who I want to be. So I wanted you to have that what it tastes like when you meet that person. And that's what I want to share with you today. And also, so much is going on in the world. You know, people are hurting right now. There are so many things happening. The whole system is kind of you know, it's like shaking. And how does that affect us? Should we bother to do something about it, or should we do something about it? And how much should we get involved, or should we just wait or somebody else will fix it? So do you see what kind of things I'm thinking? And I wanted to kind of find some answers so we can enlighten ourselves how he thinks about it. And then also people who we in our lives, like I had heard a lot of people that doctors are faking this coronavirus case for some people, even their reason of their demise was something else. But in the end, they just declare it coronavirus because they get some sort of insurance money. So if they are the tyrant, are we the victim? And if we are the victim, how do we take that journey of victimhood, if we are, to being a hero? How do we turn around in the head? And that's why I want to discover with Alan today. Is that okay?
I'm good with that.
Perfect. Thank you. So my first question, how have you coped with it? How do you think about the whole situation, what's going on in the world with the political world? So I would love you to go as in detail and explain to us how you coping with it, and give us some pointers. How should we start to think about these situations, how we may help our family. So one thing I missed earlier, it's I had heard that this is happening to other people. Now it's happened in our family. Close, my uncle, he just recently passed away, and they've done that, and we're having lots of issues. So when it hits the home, so so I just wanted to add that. So it's happened in our family now. So over to you. Please say a few words to help us understand how you coping with everything, and how we may look at this situation, please.
So what humans do in order to have a shorthand about how life works is they take the entirety of kind of everything that they can see, and they put it into one story. Now, you and I both know that as a one little body mind out here, that you can only deal with what is in your own personal life. That's what you can deal with. It doesn't mean that you can't go out and do other things, but it means that's all you can really do with it. So so when we talk about this whole subject, one of the first things to maybe take a peek at is to say, maybe I'm creating kind of all of this news and input and everything. But what's my real story? What's in front of my face? That's kind of a term very, very American, by the way, not elegant in any way, but what's in front of my face will tell you, we'll narrow it down, because the first instinct that most of us have is we say there's a worldwide epidemic and millions are being affected. There's 1,000 people dying every day in the United States. And when you start to recite all of that, it feels a bit overwhelming. I mean, how could any one human being relate to that? So the first thing to see in all of our storytelling and all of our relating to each other is what's in front of our face. So today, here we sit, there's a group of us, and we're going to have a conversation, and that's what's in front of our face right now. And so that story is easy to follow. You can look on the screen, there's Sabrina, there's Christian, there's Paolo, everybody's sitting here smiling, happy, and intently listening. So that's the real story that's happening for you and I and everybody here. And that bigger story, we'll talk about it. It's not that we're not going to talk about it, but we're not really in that story. That story of overwhelm, that is something we've created in our mind as shorthand for we've got a problem here. So we have a problem. We have a coronavirus that's out there. It's infecting people and people are dying. No doubt about that. But that's not our story particularly. So that's just the first thing just to think about. And you'll notice that we do that as humans. I mean, we go to each other and we tell each other these big stories, right? And of course, the first thing that everybody feels is overwhelmed. And in that overwhelm, really nothing, it's impossible to see what your response should be in that overwhelm. It's just not possible. So the first thing is, it's much easier, for instance, to talk about your uncle and talk about that story, because that's really a story that's happening for you. And then we can just say, okay, well, in that context, what should the conversation be about? That's one way to do that. So for me, what I see in our world today is a couple of things, but one of them is this is an opportunity for people to find their true call or their true story in life. So, and I've told you this story before. There was a very famous Indian guru. His name was J. Krishnamurti, and he was very famous in the U.S. And there was another very famous actress in France. Her name was Brigitte Bardot. If anybody remembers Brigitte Bardot, very famous actress. And one day back in the 60s, Krishnamurti was getting ready to go give his satsang. He was going to go talk to a few folks, which he did every day in Santa Barbara, California. And on the TV in black and white came these images of the slaughter of the seals. That was a big issue back at the time, was that there weren't any rules or regulations about if you could slaughter the seals. Now, Krishnamurti was getting ready to go give a satsang. And so what he said was, could you please turn the TV off? That's disturbing me and I have to go speak to everyone. And I would like to enter in a place where the disturbance isn't part of what I carry into the room with me. Now, at the very same time in France, Brigitte Bardot was watching this particular video, and it so moved her that she became an advocate and an activist and spent all of her entire energy and life over the next 20 or 30 years or more, basically on behalf of the slaughtered seals. And she and everything that she was able to accumulate changed how we deal with exactly that issue. So that's what Brigitte Bardot did. And the reason I tell that story is just to see that in both of these cases, the perfect story was lived out. The call for Krishnamurti was actually to go and speak to all of the people that he was going to speak to. And the call for Brigitte Bardot was to spend her life in the service of the seals. And both of those things were exactly the perfect thing. So what happens with us all is when we're in the confusion of the huge story, we don't know which specific thing that there is for us to do particularly. That becomes a difficult thing to kind of pull out. So what I speak to people about all the time is, how do you find your real story? Because finding that real story will then give you the understanding of where your calling is. And in fact, I mean, it even gets into a deeper, place than that. But you move in pieces. So just to start with, that's a really great piece to know. So in a way, what I see in our world is that we've forgotten over the last 20, 30 years how to actually engage personally and be in the journeys that we used to always be in. For instance, when I was 37, I'm 67 now, so I'm about 37 years old in 1990 when I decided to launch off and go to India. And when I went there, I was met by a whole bevy of people that were there to support me in my particular journey. The idea that one would be on a spiritual journey was looking to the depths of who they were, knew there was probably something wrong, probably didn't even know what spirituality was, to be honest with you, but knew that they needed to do something. And so I went to India, and here were all of these beautiful possibilities with people supporting me, people that would engage with me, people that poured their life energy into this, crazy white corporate dude from California who flew into their country. You would have thought I was from there. The way they treated me, I was immediately received as family, and everybody worked to really make sure that this guy that had shown up was supported and helped and got everything that he needed. So that was the state in 1990. And then we seemed to discover technology and content and all of this. And we as humans we think we're really smart. So we decided to replace the experience that I had with the experience of, let me give you a video, let me give you some nice writing. What do I have to support you as a human? I have content. That thing where we would give each other hugs and we had a heart, and you would sit down at mom's table and she would cook you food and you could feel the love and you would just come out of a spiritual world. Now what replaces that today is an attachment on an email. Here's your love, have some. I copied 22 people because everybody can get love this way. Ain't that great? And in a way, you gotta say to yourself, I think we might be missing the point if what we're trying to do is express love, and we're doing it through email attachments. That might be a way to think. So our world has devolved into that, and I think consciousness itself raises its hand every now and then and says, "Children, come back." Right? So there's a very famous story about the big Zen master. You know, I love the Buddhist stories because you can always imagine that these Zen Buddhists and Buddhists are really big people. You ever think of the Zen master? It's always a really big guy, right? So imagine the big Zen master. He's a really big guy, and he's sitting next to the fellow who came to him that wanted to ask a question. And he's laying there next to the big Zen master, and he says, "Master, master," he says, "I can't breathe." And the Zen master sat for a minute, and then he lifts this big, huge body of his off of his little seated meditation seat, takes 2 steps over, sits down on the chest of this young man who's laying on the floor, looks him in the eyes and says, "Breathe now." So when I look at what's happening to us right now, I have this feeling that the Zen master is sitting on our chest, and what we're getting in the communication is breathe now. And what the communication is if you've forgotten to go inside, and if you've forgotten your spiritual journey, when you think you can't breathe and then I sit on your chest, that's the signal that you may want to go inside. And so when I look at what's going on in our conscious world, I watch everybody scrambling to respond to the outside, and I think to myself, they may be missing the point. The consciousness, I think, is actually asking us to go inside, and that in the going into the inside, we'll find that perfect story that we are. And remember, I'll always tell you this, that authentic story, the more authentic it becomes, the more it seeks to serve. So as you find your most authentic place in a story, to your own surprise, you're going to find out that you want to help and you want to serve. That just comes with it. And it will guide you into exactly where you need to be. So for Krishnamurti, it was giving satsang. For Bridget Bardot, it was saving the seals. But those are fully developed emergences that want to happen. And most of us right now, I think, are asking themselves, what should we do and how should we do it? So as a personal experience, I had a meeting today, and I've had a meeting with 2, and I think maybe on the call, with the boys at Sarva. Sarva is this amazingly beautiful idea about teaching to the next generation. So how do we do that? So of course you can imagine that's my life's purpose, is how do we mentor and teach and deliver and of course, I guess I kind of think that teaching the young ones might be more intelligent than the old ones, because the old ones are going to die sooner. So that's just the way I do the math. So so of course I'm wildly enthusiastic about the project that that these 2 particular fellows are engaged in. And the beauty of it is that project itself, it doesn't really know yet how it's going to do what it's going to do. And yet what happens is that it can be the vehicle for everybody who's associated with it to go to the bottom of their own story. And then Sarva will become the reflection of the stories. That's what it will become. Now, the beauty of the two founders of Sarva is, if you ask them what their company is, they're going to tell you, we don't know. It's making itself up. We're going to let it become what it's going to become. That's a perfect thing, because now we'll take a deep dive and we'll start figuring out how to build that. That'll be the next thing that we do. So so notice going to the inside is what feeds the blossoming of the outside. And if you jump into the outside too soon and you're living from a place of ego, those two will lock themselves in. The ego will no longer mature, and neither will the idea or the story that it's attached to. So even when you find your purpose in life, you still have to dig deep inside so that the circulation of wisdom happens within the project and the story itself. So the inner feeds the outer. And so that's always my perception of anything. And it's entirely about the spiritual journey and the authentic rootedness of each of the stories that contribute to any kind of outcome in consciousness. So that's how I would say it.
I have liked everything how you described it, and I can see the picture and know it's the truth. However, on the ground, when it's affecting people on the personal level, so if I'm it almost feels like I'm being passive to there are human beings on this planet who are kind of engineering situations for us on the ground, how this world should look like. And that is kind of scary because, you know, we talked about free will and how consciousness is actually doing everything through us. And everything you say, I do feel that what I've been learning so far about spirituality was always like I've been learning kindergarten spirituality. So what you're telling me, it feels like, yeah, that is my next upgrade of how I think about, like, I'm a spirit. How do I show up in the world? So 100% agreed. But I still can't see how can I just be so passive about the tyrant who is designing sort of the world for me and the children and my nephew and my, like, all the people in my life. How do we think about that? How do we like deal with that situation? If you could say something about that.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So you know, let's go to your uncle, because that's really the you know, the one who is at play here. So rather than make up a story, let's use the story that's been given to us. Okay, so if your grieving family were to talk to me about your uncle and say, what can I do, or what can come of this experience? Say they ask me that question. I think that's the question you're asking me, isn't it? Is that a fair? Okay. So that's the question. The family gathers around and they say, Alan, look, you know, this beloved uncle died. And not only that, the medical deliveries were weak at best, if not downright criminal. And the medical system itself is a complete shambles in our country, as well as others like the one I live in. So we have all that at play. What should we do? And I would say, you know, look, let's take two. I can come up with two options. You pick. Okay. So number one option is we're all going to sit around here and we're going to design a plan so that we can become activists in the medical system, so that we can exact some justice, so we feel better about our uncle, and then possibly make things better for the other people that will have to come along later. And when we do all of that, we will be acting in the drama of individuals as though they were individuals and as though that was really what was going on, and that's what we'll do. So that's one option that we can take, and we'll decide as a group, this is the service and the activity we want to belong in. That's one option, right? Or another option that is in store is that, what if you knew that we were all, and you could feel this, by the way, you could feel it and experience, and you knew that all of us were one thing, and we are going to call that consciousness. So we're all really the same thing. Now, we think that each of the bodies that we are named something different, right? And we even in our intellect hold the stories, because where does a story live? Think about that for a minute. It lives in the intellect. It's not really happening out there. We look out there and say, oh, there's a dog. And the minute we say there's a dog, we've created what we see into a story. We've pulled the dog out, ignored everything else, and said, there's a dog. And the there's a dog is a story. Where does the story live? It lives in our intellect, in each of these bodies that we have. And we believe that those are stories. But what if I told you you can walk out of that world and know that you are consciousness itself, and that consciousness is just living each of these bodies, right? Now, what would be the wonderful payoff from knowing that, right? Well, the wonderful payoff would be, instead of thinking that we had an uncle and we lost an uncle, we would say, oh my God, we are all consciousness and we are all love. And one of the bodies, it passed away. But we didn't lose the uncle. He's always been part of us, and he'll always be part of us. That's who we really are. So you pick between those two options. We'll become activists, and we will handle the medical system in India. That's one of our choices. Or the other choice is we'll spend our time and walk into a place that we will know that our uncle really never left us, and there is really no grieving to be done. You can have either of those two. Pick and let me know.
So
that would be what. Go ahead.
I love the second option because it keeps my sanity. It keeps me sane because I have other dreams and visions and my life here. So I don't really have the capability to doing my life and go to India and fight for the departed soul, being practical here. So even though I feel, if you're looking at large, so these tyrants, so what I'm trying to get to, the hope is just that okay, well, this soul has never really departed. So this is where where is the hope here in this whole story that I'm finding, so I can keep myself sane and all the other people who are listening, and then we can help how do we bring hope to other people in the world right now?
So the way you do it, if you think about it, so who is, when somebody is grieving over the loss of a close relative, family member, whatever, and they have died, what are they really doing? Do they really care about that person? Or are they freaked out about the fact that they might die? Which of those two things do you think is really happening there?
Well, the system I'm familiar with, the Indian culture, they are more worried about the loss of the person, what they brought on in their lives. So they lost that. I feel that they don't really have the intellectual understanding of the spiritual understanding, because they don't have that. So they are like grieving the loss of the person, the gifts that person gave them, I think. Instead of the soul, instead of the soul.
That's one way to look at it, but they believe that who they are is something that can die and be lost and go away and become non-existent. That's their belief, isn't it? Don't they believe that their uncle actually died and went away? So, and they don't know where he went. They just know that uncle's gone and he's never going to show up in their life again. The thing that's not going to show up in their life is the story. Where's the story held? In your intellect, right? So fair enough. That's the only place it lives. So, but they actually think that that's who they are. And so when they see uncle, how could it be that when they see uncle die, that at some very level deep inside themselves, they don't say, holy shit, that's going to happen to me.
Right.
That's so they grieve and they mourn and they do everything because they believe in a story that leads them to go through all of that grieving and all of the rest of it. And they actually a lot of times stay stuck in that story, and that becomes the story that lives the rest of their life. You see people, when I lived in South America, that would have people died 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they were still wearing black every day. Their whole life became a function of something that happened 50 years ago. And people all over our world live that story. So the possibility here is, what's the other story that could be lived? The other story that could be lived is the possibility of seeing that nothing died, right? That the only thing that died was a story, and that what that person actually was is actually what we are all along. And if that were true, wouldn't that free them up to find what their real story is and have it lived? Because every story is just consciousness living through a person.
Yes.
And the question is, does that person believe that they are autonomous and not a part of consciousness, and that the story that they are is who they are and they're going to die? Or do they know that they're simply being lived as a part of consciousness? They're a conduit. Life just moves through them. So Sabrina isn't Sabrina, right? Sabrina is simply this amazing, wonderful bundle of love who is, at some point in time, the body will fall off. But how could anybody who knows Sabrina think that that love is going to go anywhere? Right? So we know that when Sabrina leaves, the love will not go anywhere. That love is part of what's already here. So we fool ourselves to think that it's in some way, shape, or form we're going to lose Sabrina. It just isn't a possibility. But we don't believe that. We've been taught that the other story is in play. And so what we do is we try. So I often talk about the map and the territory. And I say what humans do is they build a map, and then they believe that that's the territory, and they go have epic battles and fights and everything else in the map of stories, as though that's real, right? And it's no different than a child under a blanket inviting the fairies and the dragons and the princes and princes to come in and play with them under the blanket. And when does the story end for the child? Well, they take the blanket off and they go do something else. Story's over, right? I don't see those children crying about the fact that the princes and princesses and the dragons are all dead now. They don't think that. They know they can go put the blanket up and invite them back anytime they'd like. So the story world is something that you can have anytime you want. You don't need to have any fights in the story world. It's going to live itself, right? But the world that we're not a part of is the real world of consciousness, which is who we are. We don't understand. We don't have a living understanding. We have a living understanding of what it's like to be someone who can be born and can die, and loss will occur as a result of that. But we don't have a story that says, oh, what we are is consciousness itself. So people like me walk around and say, let me give you a story for that. Because if you can stand in the story, maybe you kind of get used to it. And after a while, if you're used to it, you'll start to see that one story is as good as another. And if that story leads you to your absolute rooted consciousness, then isn't it grand? We've accomplished what we're trying to accomplish by giving someone this particular possibility. So what's the possibility? So I see myself as engaged in relieving the suffering of an entire planet. So you tell me, what story would you like? What story do you think is more important than relieving the suffering in an entire planet? And I'll put it right in front of the line. Okay. So I guess it's no small wonder, right? I'm going to encourage you to go live in a place where your suffering is eliminated, right? Because that's what this is about. That's what the Alan story is all about. His purpose in life is saying what is being said. Now, is Alan saying that? No, existence or consciousness, I'm just a puppet, right? And it has its hand up my ass and it's making my mouth do this. That's all that's going on here. because Alan's not really all that smart, to be honest with you. And he's really not all that elegant. There's a lot of things that Alan isn't. And God knows why consciousness decided to make this particular mouth yap, except for it seems to be pretty good at that. But the bottom line is that's what's going on, and all it is. Now, is that wisdom my wisdom? It's not. It's free to anybody that wants to embrace it.
So I get it.
Okay.
We've been taught I am the master of my soul, captain of my of my life. So how, when what you're saying, that's I believe that all of us, all the books that we read, we all well read, everybody, that's what our belief is. And otherwise we become passive and complacent, like where is our life going?
Right.
So we have to believe that, okay, I have some sort of contribution in building my life. Otherwise, what's my purpose then?
Yeah.
So if you can share something about that.
So all I'm saying is that the mechanics that we imagine that make life happen lead us to a place where we intuitively know that something's wrong. So in the West, we have this guy that comes every 25th of December, and we call him Santa Claus, right? So imagine the world that said, hey, you know what? I grew up and Santa Claus was the deal, and I'm really, really clear that I learned all of that. I spent 40 years learning everything there was to know about Santa Claus, and now you're trying to tell me that that's just a story and Santa Claus isn't real? Why should I believe that? So all that's happening here is, as a society and a culture and everything, we take our children and we condition them into believing that they are in charge of their own life and that they are the autonomous authors of all that happens. And that's what we teach them. And then we give them knowledge and we teach them they're a separate ego. Now, separation is an intellectual exercise. And think of what separation does. It contrasts and divides. That's what it does. So that's what the intellect does, right? So, and then we argue about things. We believe there is a truth. How do we know what truth is? It depends on, I've discovered we have a new definition. We used to think truth was in the content itself. Now it's if you can argue the best on Facebook, you're speaking the truth. It's just a new, it's a new level of definition that says the best arguer on Facebook obviously is the winner of the truth game. So fair enough, we have a way of getting to the truth. But there comes a moment where we say, hey, I'm going to tell you that the life that you have lived, which was perfect for you as a child, it taught you a lot of things. It equipped you with a bunch of knowledge, right? And now we're going to leave Santa Claus behind and we're going to step into the world of wisdom. And that entire world works differently. So let's use an advanced example rather than the stupid ones I use. Let's talk about Newtonian physics, right? Newtonian physics, as everybody know, Isaac Newton created all of how physics works, right? And one day this fellow came along called Albert Einstein, and he created this thing called the theory of relativity, which grew into this thing called quantum theory, right? And everybody knows that in order to even play in the pond of relativity and quantum theory, that you have to get rid of most of what you believe in Newtonian physics, because all of that stuff in Newtonian physics doesn't apply to the world as held by relativity and quantum. It just doesn't, right? And now we're even to this next level where we're starting to talk about consciousness and what consciousness is and how it emerges and the Big Bang. You know, that's a world, and that's going to get rid of a lot of the stuff that lives in quantum. So I guess what's interesting is you have to start to ask yourself, well, I'm okay with that, but someone comes along and I know that inside I know something's wrong, and the message comes, hey, let me kind of show you what's wrong. I'm going to leave Newtonian and I'm going to walk into quantum, and you say, wait a minute, I spent a lot of time in that Newtonian stuff. How can you tell me you're going to take that away? How can that possibly be? So then the question falls back on you. Where's the resistance? Right? So that you get to go take a look at. What's the resistance from giving up Santa Claus and moving into quantum? Why is that happening, you see?
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the journey. The journey is to actually take a look and say, oh man, there is actually something here that when I step into it, it serves in a way that whatever was going on before didn't serve, and I can actually feel the peace inside of me. That tells me that this new thing, this wisdom place that I'm stepping into, is the next possibility. It's the next place to stand.
Okay. So where is the resistance? Why is that so difficult for us to step into the wisdom and move from knowledge path?
Sure. Because you know how everything kind of has its good side and its bad side, right? So you're a mathematical wizard, right? You're like the next Trayshawn of the world, and but somebody says something to you like, I would like to get an ice cream, and you respond in the quadratic formula. That probably isn't the way to get an ice cream. Wild guess, but probably not. So the good news is Trayshawn is incredibly equipped mathematically. The bad news is his mathematics doesn't get us ice cream. You see how that is? So there is just a misidentification of how mathematics gets used if one's attempting to take the quadratic formula and produce ice cream, right? It's just that it doesn't work. So we are led to believe, right? We are told that we are an autonomous author or decision maker of our own life. And then we come to a place where we find out that actually we're part of a conscious emergence, and we're just a piece of that. How do we then, right, act when that's the case? Well, the bad news is that previous learning, that the aliveness of consciousness itself connected itself to the idea that we were separate, and it believed it. It bought in. So the good news about consciousness is it's this wonderful thing. The bad news is it believes anything we tell it. Okay, it's a quadratic formula run amok, because it just quadratics all the time. That's all it does. So the ego, which is an intellectual way for you and I to have a conversation, because if I didn't have an ego and I said, hey, Preet, you wouldn't answer. In the intellect, there needs to be enough in there so Preet knows when I go, hey, Preet, she goes, what? Or Preet says, hey, Alan, what? Right? Paolo says, hey, abuelo, the old man needs to answer, right? If I stay here silent and Paolo's going, hey, abuelo, and nothing happens behind that, guess what? Right? He's going to say, what's wrong with this? Hey, yo. So the ego has its purpose, right?
Right.
But the ego's not driving the car, and we've led it to believe that it is. The ego, as you can see, is the navigator. It's there to help us whenever we need it. So when we say, I'm going to be speaking to Preet, the ego's like, no problem, say Preet, and Preet will say, hey, Alan, and everything will happen perfectly, right? So this communication happens within the world of what we call duality, or time and space, in the intellectual exercise of who we are. But the real action is consciousness itself that lives underneath all of that. And so when you point to that consciousness, you need to use a different style of approach. And you also need to understand that your ego is going to probably throw a fit, right? So you walk in and you say to one of the kids, hey, look, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. They're likely to throw a fit. Because you know what? They kind of liked Santa Claus. He was pretty cool. Yeah. Brought stuff every December 25th. It was even worse for me. My grandfather's birthday was on December 25th, and so we always got a birthday cake at the end of Christmas Day. I always thought that was included. So when they took Santa Claus away from me, that was really a big problem, because they were taking not only were they taking the front end of the day away with the presents and the food, they were taking Grandpa's birthday cake away. At least I thought when they explained it to me. Thank goodness my mom stepped in and said, no, all of it stays. We just know that Santa Claus isn't real. And I'm like, oh, so I still get the dinner, I still get the cake. Okay, I'm good. Because I'm a little like Paolo in that way. You know, I don't really, you guys keep your Santa Claus story. As long as they're serving dinner and cake, I'm in. So they were able to get me past the loss of Santa Claus, but some kids don't take it so well. And your ego doesn't really like it when it's spent 30 or 40 years thinking it's in charge. Mm-hmm. And some bozo like me comes along and says, oh, I just thought I'd tell you, that's not how it works.
Ego, I agree. Ego is that definitely makes things complicated for us to kind of get through to make progress in our spiritual journey. But also, if you look at just in India alone, so many different spiritual principles and disciplines. You've done Advaita. I know there's Vedanta, and then there's Vipassana, there's Brahma Kumaris, there's Hinduism. There's like so much on our plate, and we do need some sort of spiritual, we need to hand holding to understand this spiritual journey. But how do we discern which is the right one for us to take?
Well, we're magnetically attracted to the ones that work for us. So you mentioned all of those traditions, right? So they're all great paths. They're all perfect. They really are.
But they all seem to think. So I happen to actually, just before I met you, I happened to research, or not research. I actually went inside the organization, trying to be one of them. And I spent sometimes months, and with the Brahma Kumari Center, I spent years living like them, thinking I was one of them, because I wanted to understand what the truth is. What's a true ultimate truth and an ultimate spiritual true path. How do we just be magnetized? Because I was magnetized with all of them. But what I understood after researching all of them, spending time with them, they all said, I'm right. Whatever you're doing is wrong, like the outside religion or spiritual organization, they all had this idea. Then I also realized that entrepreneurs think like that, and then all religions think like that also. And how could I, so if you were coming into my life, and whatever faith you have, and I have my own faith, when you come to my life, and I already made a decision that whatever you believe is wrong because my path is right and yours is wrong. How is that relationship of respect? So I sometimes think that this is what the biggest problem in the world is. So if we can learn to think that there's one sort of underlying spiritual path, that's why I love the consciousness, the wisdom path you're taking me to, because that's kind of sort of raising me above to all those different cultures and traditions.
So what's really happening is that there are various paths to the same place, because the solution to understanding ego, right, is when the boundaries of ego dissolve. So I think Dilraj is still on here. So I see him in a meeting. He and I have had one meeting together, but he comes on the screen and I see myself. Right, there he is. Right, and why is that? Well, the boundaries of the ego Alan have dissolved over time in such a way that the intellectual or living understanding sees everybody as themselves. So I think you muted yourself. I can't hear your words.
No, I wasn't saying. My mom is trying to join now, so apologize.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah,
okay.
I was just telling Christian that. Sorry.
So it's seen that way, right? So how do you get to that boundaryless place, right? So the beauty of India is that it is over thousands of years developed enough that it holds many paths to that same place. So if you're in the bhakti, what they call the bhakti, there's kind of three basic, and you could fill them in, but they're parts of the same thing. So there's the bhakti path. And the bhakti path is when you love somebody to such a degree that the boundaries of you and them disappear. Right? So there's your boundaries dissolving. The seva path is one where you engage in service and you serve the other to such a degree that the other disappears and the boundaries dissolve. And so that's the end of that path. And then in the path that you and I are dealing with, which is particularly perfect for our world, is what we call Advaita, and that's the intellectual path. And what it sees is that there's a large part of our world that holds the world intellectually, and those intellectual holdings are actually the bondage that we feel. So what are we going to dissolve? We're going to dissolve the concepts. And so those who traffic in the world of concepts are particularly available to this path. And guess what? I come from the corporate world of the United States. I don't probably have to tell you that my world is one of concept and intellect. There's nobody doing seva or bhakti in the corporate world, at least as far as I know. But what there are a lot of people that are incredibly intellectually equipped. And so the path that you and I are engaging in is the one that works for people that are like you and I. And so you were like, hey, wouldn't that be lovely if that worked for the whole world? And I guess it would, but it doesn't, right? And remember that everything that lives in the wisdom world will get snatched out, and it'll get concretized into a concept that will then be planted in the knowledge world, and it will pretend it's doing the same thing. But you can always tell where the problem is, because it will claim to be the only truth. And anytime something claims to be the only truth, it's not living in the world of wisdom. There is no only truth. In fact, there's no truth whatsoever in the world of wisdom. There's only stories, right? The truth in the world of wisdom is we make up stories, and that those stories are only as good as what we make up. So there's no truth. So when you come to me, all I do is fool you into believing that I'm going to tell you the truth, and I tell you there's no truth. So I lie, cheat, steal, and deceive with a smile on my face in order to get you out of the idea that there's such a thing as truth. And that's the path of wisdom. That's what's happening there, right? So that's all that's going on. So anytime in the moment that you say something and there is an only and something else is excluded, I know you're talking about the world of knowledge. The world of knowledge uses intellect in order to make meaning by including some things and excluding others. That's the only world that truth exists.
Okay, so in the path of knowledge, there are human beings on the planet who have capitalized that world, where they are almost taking resources. I'll give you an example. Melinda Gates kept talking about everywhere, vaccine for Africa, vaccines for India, and women are going through postnatal stress. I found this letter from a midwife from Africa. She said, I have no idea what Melinda Gates is talking about, because I'm a midwife and delivered hundreds and hundreds of babies. Not one single time any woman reported as any sort of depression signs. And then I heard Melinda Gates interview about, ones and zeros, the programming, and everybody was like, wow, right? So I felt that woman was 100 times more wiser than Melinda Gates, but Melinda Gates has this intellectual power, and she's queued in lots of resources from common people to their livelihood, and they are sucking all these resources to this 1%. how do we
Yeah.
then, is knowledge based not then knowledge path is not then I mean they've certainly got better human experience because they get to live in a better places, they get to fly, like they get to have better experiences, whereas
Yeah.
most human beings sometimes they struggle with the common things. That's why you always see me like, if I get something like beautiful, I always share it first before I even enjoy it. Maybe that's my drawback, like something not I should change about myself. But before I even experience it myself, and I think this is really good, I want to share it with the world. So maybe the knowledge path is like in one way it's a good thing, because look at these people, they are kind of pushing all these
Yeah.
resources higher up.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, if you start to watch how you've created your story about what the world is, you know, what you would want to do is to start to say, well, maybe my holding of all of that it may not be how it actually happens. Let's just assume that you and I could explore that. Because there are ways to talk about what you're talking about. So I could say, well, you know, Preet, what's the happiest country in the world? They go out and they do that every year, and they figure out what the happiest country in the world. For the last 10 years, it's been the same country. Who knows what the happiest country in the world is?
Yeah.
You know
Burma
which one
or
it is?
Burma. No, Burma.
That's Bhutan.
Bhutan, sorry. Yes.
There you go. So
Yes.
Bhutan's the happiest country in the world, right?
Yes.
Have you now? It's fast moving to a new level of dissatisfaction. I just want you to know that, right? Which I find kind of interesting, because what is happening in Bhutan that's making it go from happy to a level of dissatisfaction? They're getting all of these resources you're speaking of. They're building roads and cars and 5-star hotels and restaurants and all of this stuff. So you have to start to say to yourself, well, maybe there's a possibility that I have a story that says that happiness lives in a place that it may not live in. Now, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. I mean, I spent my whole life in the corporate world, so it's not like I haven't been involved in producing outputs, right? And resources. I've been in the resource world. It's not that I haven't done that. I have. But the question is, what then happens with those resources? Because if somebody says, those resources will make me happy and I'm powerful and I can hold them all to myself, and 0.2% of the world has the resources and the rest of them don't, then you can kind of see that that's a problem, probably, in terms of what resources are. But the other possibility is that resources aren't the source of happiness. And so both of those come into play. And so to me, you look at me, I was supposed to be a billionaire. I was I was quoted in the Wall Street Journal. I was the young phenom. By the time I was 35 years old, I was financially finished. I had climbed the mountain. I had attained, life was good. Now I was able to get rid of all of that. I got divorced and a few things when I went to India. And so I was able to find a way to get rid of all of that security. But a lot of people don't. They just live their life and they continue to build the pile of gold. And that's awesome. So I could have done that. That would have been one way to go after it, right? But here I sit today, and I'm out in the middle of some, backwoods place. You probably hear the birds chirp every now and then, the dogs bark for sure. And, I get up with the sun, I go to sleep with the sun. And what I do is talk and connect with people I love, right? I found out, by the way, that I'm part of a family that actually is located in London. Who knew? And, So, I mean, all of these things are happening, right? And then somebody says to me, oh my God, wouldn't it be better if you had all the stuff that Bill and Melinda Gates has? And I'd say something like, dude, I know Trayshawn, I'm good. You tell Bill Gates to keep his crap. I got Trayshawn, we're good. I got Paolo, I got Trayshawn. I've got, you know, I got people, I'm going to go to London and you know what? They're going to make a meal unlike any meal anybody's ever seen. Tell them to keep their damn money. This is the deal. The deal that's happening in this life. Now, am I wealthy? No, I'm not wealthy. When you come here, I've got guest cottages. It's a cement floor and some walls that are painted pretty and a bed and a desk and something to hang your stuff on. And you walk out the door and you're in the weeds. It's all grass and plants. That's all it is. The plants grow for free. You know, I got a papaya tree down here. You know why? Because the birds eat the seeds and poop out the papaya seeds. And I got a papaya plant down here. Free.
I wasn't implying the happiness. I can already sense that they're probably not happy, but they have this some sort of access to resources, which I want all the children to have, all the people to have the basic resources available. I wasn't talking about the planes and all that stuff. That I know that doesn't give you happiness, but I hear your point. I just want to open to everybody else that if anybody else have any questions. I do have one question, which is a big one, but I'll hold it. I just want to ask everybody else if anybody else want to share anything, or how do you feel right now? If you have any other question for Alan.
By the way, is your mother on?
Yes, she is. Yes, here's my mom. It's at 3 o'clock in the morning for her, and she does her Amrit Vela, which is nectar time, and that's what she's done since I remember as a child. Even when we used to go to a mountain, this Mount Tabu, this place on highest mountain in India, Rajasthan, she will wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, have a cold shower. And I'll be like shivering and like, how can I be your daughter? Like, I'm just like shivering. So she's like a brave, mom, and she's here. We can't see you, Mom. Can you turn the light on so everybody can see you?
She doesn't have to. She doesn't have to. Just know that my thank you for coming on. Thank you. I love India, and to have a real Indian mom on is the highlight of my life. So thank you. I really appreciate it. So that's all I want to say. That's all I needed to say.
Mom, I'll translate that maybe later, but Alan ਉਹ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਮਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਹੈ ਪੂਰੇ ਦਿਨ ਦੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਕੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ. So, okay. Anybody else? I'm going to unmute yourself and all the kids and Jinsi. If anybody want to ask any questions, Dil, go ahead. Who wants to just say I won? Anybody?
You know what? It's amazing. This has not been a very shy group up till now, huh? Wow.
Right? Looks like my sister has a question. Go on, Jin.
Yeah. Hi, Ellen. I forgot to say you hi. So I really like the thing you said, the soul about my uncle. So this is what I kept saying to my sister, like
cousins.
So she lost her, cousins, like the one who lost her father. So my uncle is still there. He was an amazing father, amazing person. We bounded to him like from deep inside, to like from our hearts. So his soul is still there. We can still feel his love. So that was really great. So I'm not doubtful about my answer now. So this is what I was saying to my sister.
What was your question, darling?
So
go ahead. I was just going to say, when you see the story of your uncle end, it's okay to feel grief about that, because who wants a story to end? But know that he's still there. So the crying and the sadness is great because the story ended and we like that story. But know that he's still there, and then you're off the hook of grieving forever.
Yeah. So my question is about my son. I really want to raise him like in a right manner. So I don't know, like if I'm asking about the right thing. So I want him to be like, if he's choosing, even he's 6. So I really want him to be like really responsible, choosing anything like in his life. If it's like, he should know, like, if it's right for him, if it's not right for him. So how can I do this? Like he was listening to you before, he was sitting beside me, and then his concentration just like changed into his mobile, like he stopped playing the game. So I want him to like, concentrate more about his life, like about the things he has to be serious about them. So so this is my question. How can I do that?
It's a great question. It's a really great question. So remember, to a 6-year-old, adults are boring, and they are. So he should be playing a game, listening to me for an hour. No 6-year-old should have to do that. That would be So 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and if I'm telling stories, I might keep his attention. But 6-year-olds shouldn't. Or is he 6 or 9? I forgot. Anyway,
6. He's 6 years old.
6 years old. Yeah. So look at the difference in the way that a parent looks at their child and what the possibility of a child is. The parent says, here's what I think my child needs to be and what he needs to know in order to survive in the world that I live in. So out of their heart, right, they try to deliver that into that child's life. Okay. So that's what they do, right? Now let's go stand in his shoes for a minute and say, what is the child's life about? Well, at 6 years old, the child's life is about gathering enough stuff so that they even know what they like and don't like. So as a mother, the best thing you can do for your child is let him explore as much as he possibly can, because he's not where you are yet. If you force him to make a decision, you'll be putting something in place that may not be the thing that he's most attracted to. And then he'll live the rest of his life in this kind of knowing that something's wrong, like I'm doing this thing I hate, not that I love, but I was told that that's what I needed to do, when in fact, all you need to do is sponsor his exploration. Now, what do I know about mothers? I'm a dad, so mothers, just remember, are way more complicated and way more impressive than dads are. Dads are the simple version. So I can talk about the complicated version, but what's beautiful about moms is that because they have such a huge platform, because they're all heart, when you say, hey, just take that platform and let your boy play on it until he finds what he likes, it takes all the pressure out of being a mom. You don't have to think about finding something for him anymore. All you have to do is hold him and let him play on the mom's playground. So now, the other thing is, if you're a mom and you have a boy, that's confusing as well, because boys and, there's nothing that will test femininity more than a son, because he's going to do stuff that makes no sense in a woman's world, right? That's what he's going to do. That's his job. That's what he does. So I'm the oldest of 5. 4 of us are boys. My poor sister was right in the middle, but there were 2 boys on each end of that, right? And my mother, who I always say that if you're a boy's mom, you are the epitome of motherhood, because what that means is that you were willing to tear apart the very fabric of being a woman in order to sponsor a male child in a playground of finding himself. So, I mean, that's we should all stand aside and say, wow, because if you're a boy's mom, you that's the supreme mother sacrifice in that story, right? So that's what that is. So the neat thing about it, though, is that with a boy especially, just sponsor, because he's always going to come back. You know, watch me. My mother died in 1993. So she's been gone a lot of years. 27 years ago, my mom died, right? And my relationship to the world as a man, ask any of the women, you know, what am I looking forward to? Well, there's nothing that's more glorious for this male child than when a woman makes some food for me, because that was my favorite thing that my mom did. So the way that I go relive that platform of the story of Alan that just loves any of that activity, it's the platform that Alan gets to wander around and find anything that he wants to. Because when mom made me food and sat me down at the table, she would talk to me, and anything was possible in the conversation. Anything I wanted to talk about, anything I wanted to do. That was her way of doing that. So I go revisit my mother anytime a woman that loves me makes me food. I turn into 10-year-old little Alan sitting at the table, smile on my face, eating food, totally in love, asking questions and talking about all the stuff the stupidest stuff that nobody wants to hear about, except for a woman who lovingly made you food. That's the person that wants to hear all of that stuff. So that's what you do. That's how you mother him. And it takes all the pressure off.
Beautiful. That was a
Thank
wonderful
you
question.
so much. Yeah, I know. Thank you so much, Alan.
You're welcome, sweetie.
Trey's got the next question. Where's Trey? Trey, go ahead.
Thank you.
I got a hard one. Okay. Does it have math in it?
No. Ask if, like, you have any advice when it comes to sort of like sharing your story and how like telling stories relates to different areas of life.
Yeah. So can I use you as an example?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So everybody meet Trayshawn. So what Trayshawn has naturally as a human being that you can see the minute you engage with him is an incredible depth. He's got what I call a quiet permanence. So when you listen to Trayshawn speak, what's underneath it all is this. It's kind of like the bass drum in an orchestra. It's the part you always know is there, and it's the part that supports everything else that's going on, but it's not the part that you necessarily can pick out. And so Trayshawn has that piece, right? So the thing, if I'm going to work with you to start to see, is that it doesn't matter what that moves into. It can move into anything. Whatever the moment asks you to do, you can move into that. You're giving people advice right now. I watch your videos, right? But the magic is to let that change. The outer stuff, let that change so that that inner piece of who you are, that fuel, that gas in the gas tank will continue to feed all of that stuff. Because where you are, you're still in the exploration of, gee, I'm finding all of the things I love, right? So I wanted to be a philosophy professor. When I was in your position, that's what I wanted to be. I loved philosophy. My grandfather would sit me on his lap, tell me stories of Socrates. And I actually thought that Socrates hung around with a bunch of 5-year-old boys that like me, because that's how Grandpa made the story. It wasn't until years later when I studied real philosophy that I found out that he was actually talking to adults. So I thought Socrates gathered the little children around and told them stories about philosophy. That's who I thought he was, which was a great Socrates for me to have. But that's how Grandpa put the story out there, because he was talking to his 5-year-old grandson, right? So that's what I wanted to be. So what did I become? Well, I got into the world and I'm studying philosophy, and they come to me and they say, Alan, you're the best philosophy student we've ever had. Unfortunately, there's no jobs. You need to do something that takes a job. So what did I do? I studied accounting, because, you know, obviously any philosophy student would automatically do accounting as the companion to philosophy. And so accounting had jobs, right? And I got into this wonderful world of the corporate world, and I started to see that their style of philosophy was, how does it work on the ground? It was a philosophy that was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was just perfect for Alan, but I didn't start to even see that until I was 25 years old. But I always knew I loved philosophy, and I knew I loved the stories that Grandpa told me, and I knew somehow I belonged in that world. And here I am, doing bean counting, right? But then I started to see that even math was a story. Wow, that was the coolest thing ever. And so what happened to me, Trayshawn, was that over time that developed. And guess what? In a way, I guess you could say that I'm a philosopher in the corporate world. It's a different kind of philosopher. But what happened was that the need to move to the bottom and the rootedness of consciousness happened inside of me. And so the Alan story made that what he did. And that was kind of the pinnacle of that search. So if I'm in your position, Trayshawn, what my job is going to be is to continue the broadcasting and let that presence, that deep bass drum presence, continue to drop itself and drop itself and drop itself. And don't worry about what's coming out. Work with what's on the inside and let what comes out be what it is, because it'll be the right thing. I've never heard you say anything that I thought wasn't the right thing to say. So the beauty is what you're saying now is entirely connected. Don't get lost in what's on the outside. It's the bass drum on the inside that's going to be, your companion and what drives you. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Beautiful.
All right, sweetie.
Who's next? Go ahead, Paolo.
Oh, Paolo, cool.
Hi, Abuelo, and hi, everyone. It's great to see all of you. So my question is, and our question is, what is the most important thing to do when you are telling a story?
Okay. Great. That's a really great question. So I want you to know, Trayshawn, who is just on, is the numbers and math guy, and you guys all know I'm a financial guy. He's a financial guy too. So Trayshawn and I have a deep love of that same thing. Paolo and I have a different kind of connection, because Alan is the first one in front of any food line. And now I have a companion. Paolo is the guy that likes to go out in the street, find the colors and magic and everything, and get in line and be the guy that experiences that. So you guys have just met my kindred spirits. If these two represent the pieces that I am, and so I'm deeply in love with both of these two. We send messages every day. So Paolo, here's the beauty of story, and I talk about this. I even made up this thing called the 3 levels of story. So let me tell you what that is, right? So level number 1 is, I call that the object level, right? So we go out and I say, hey, Paolo, I went out, I saw this guy was selling hot dogs on the corner, and he puts them together and he hands them out. Isn't that cool? And Paolo says, great, I got it. So what I've done is packaged up something that I saw, and I gave it to Paolo, and Paolo now has that. And that's I created an object called a story, and I gave that to Paolo. So he now owns that. He now has that in his head, and life's good. Story over. Dude on the corner, when he sees him next time, he'll know he's doing hot dogs. Got it. The second one is, I see something out there, and I think it's pretty important. And I go to Paolo and I say, Paolo, I saw this man out on the street and he really needed some help. And here's how I think we can give him some help. Can I get you to help me to give him some help? And he says, yeah, I can help you do that. And that's the second level of story, and it has more energy in it. We call that the influencing level, right? In other words, I told you that story to influence you to come along and help me get something done, right? Because I saw something that made me want to have that happen. So I told you an influencing story, right? And the last level of story is called an invitation, right? And the invitation story is, how do I tell my story and invite whoever I'm talking to stand in my story with me so that they can see that my story is their story, right? So I just told one of those because you may not, a lot of you may not think it's all that important to go down the street, find the food that's got all the beautiful colors and stand in front of the line. But when I tell Paolo that story, he and I can both imagine, there we are, arms around each other, front of the line, there we are with the food. I told him that story. That's as much his story as it is my story. I invited him in, and there isn't any, that story's one story and there's two of us in it now. And that's how I've told that story. So I seek to tell every story that I tell, whether it's the one about Krishnamurti. I want somebody to be sitting in the front room looking at a black and white TV in 1962 and seeing the seals come on. I want them to feel like that's where they are and that's where they're sitting. I try to tell every story I tell and open it up from where I live so that I'm inviting everybody in to stand in that story with me. Because when you tell a story that way, the possibility is the boundaries of who they think they are will dissolve, and they'll see that they aren't separate at all. And if they see that, then guess what? Through story, an awakening has happened. And that's the invitation level of story. So that's what I try to do. Now, you know already that you tell stories like that, right? So you know what I'm talking about. So all you have to do is say, every time I tell a story, am I inviting whoever I'm telling the story to be in Paolo land, arms around, and we're doing it together, and they can't tell that they're a separate thing from me. If you tell your stories like that, then you're there. And you already do some of that. Do it all the time. That's all.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot of understanding around not only how to tell a story, but also how to take people along on a journey, and also the 3 different steps that you shared. Just so thank you so much, Abuelo. Just hearing it from you, such an inspirational person. Just thank you so much. I've really learned a lot. Thank you.
Oh, I just love these kids so much. Looks like Christian's got a question.
Oh, I do.
The man from Bath.
Indeed. Alan, how do we discern and tap into our origin story? That might have been on reverb because of Preet's microphone. So I'll repeat it. Alan, how do we tap into and discern our origin story?
So what I call that the origin or the original myth story. And where I got that from was a fellow named Joseph Campbell, who was very famous. He's a very famous storyteller and mythologist. And what I noticed was that he had located that in the same place that there's a thing in our world called I am in the spiritual world. And that's the first moment that you see yourself as a separate story. And the idea is, and I think it's true, that we come packaged already with the perfect energy to play the perfect story. So you heard me earlier talk to a mom who has a 6-year-old kid, and what am I encouraging her to do? Let him bang around and find that place where that story lives, because ultimately that's where he's going to go live. And if we don't give him lots of interference, we're not going to change what that story is. Now, Christian, you like me had a lot of influences that changed that original myth story into what you are now and what I became. And so the spiritual journey is always a retracing back to the consciousness that we are. So one way to do that is to go through that original myth story. So your original myth story, it lights you up in a way that no other thing can. So it's as if you plugged in to the wall and the electricity moves through you, and that's the story that happens when you plug into the wall. That's the original myth story. So how do we find it? It's really very easy. If you think about yourself, the energy that you are, it lives inside of you. So if you will go in, and I will tell you, go into your childhood somewhere, right? And find the story that lights you up. You'll feel it. It's a felt experience, and it'll pop when you find it. So I tell a story about seeing a skateboard when I'm 11 years old. And the reason I tell that story is because the most Alan part of Alan comes out. Because the most Alan part of Alan is this explosive spontaneity when he sees something that absolutely blows the world apart, right? Now, and then you see the experience. You just watch Alan, and Alan gets all geeked and excited and all over, because that's the natural Alan energy. Now, that didn't fit well in the Mormon world. It didn't fit well in the corporate world. That energy does not fit well in a lot of places. So you can imagine a lot of people tried to take that energy and make it something different than it was. But when I was 11 years old, and I had lived near the ocean, and I loved anything that had to do with boards and water, and I saw this head coming down the sidewalk, and I looked down, and for all the world, I saw a surfboard that had wheels on it, and I said, wow, I can surf the entire world with that thing. I'm there. I am unlimited. I can do it. An 11-year-old boy who sees a skateboard knows that's all that matters. There's nothing else that matters. That skateboard will do everything that that child thought that needed to happen his entire life. And I lit up like a Christmas tree.
Alan?
All right.
Go on.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway,
Go on.
I'm going to tell you now, I walk into the largest corporate meetings, billion-dollar decisions, and the first thing I do is I tell them that story.
You inspired me to go and, I need to go and get a prop. Can I go and get it? Because I know you love props. Wait there. You inspired me. Yeah, wait this.
Here's mine, by the way. Everybody wants to know that when I tell the story I just told everybody while he's gone, this is the, I can't see myself in here very well. Can everybody see that? Anyway, how come I'm not showing? There you, oh, look at that. That's a real Vans shoe, everybody. Just so you know.
You know that.
This is here's a Vans skateboard I use to tell my story right here. So,
I haven't got the board that goes with them yet, but I will be getting one. Trust me.
I know.
To the kid, man.
Yeah.
All good.
I'm telling you. So Christian, so look at Christian. Everybody who knows Christian knows that this is a very incredibly well put together Englishman, and as only, you know, and so he's respectable, wonderful, and all of that stuff. And get him to talk about skateboarding, and you'll see something different come out. I guarantee you. You know, all of a sudden, you know, you're going, "Where's the English guy? Where did he go?" Right?
He's doing all the kick flips outside.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So Christian comes to me and he says, "I got this really great idea." He goes, "I'm going to create a house, and we're going to call it the Sage House. But what it's for is we're going to go play as a way to understand leadership." And what did the Allen story immediately do? He started looking for his room in that house, because baby, I belong to that house. That's like, we're speaking now the same language, right? Because if we're going to play, and we're going to take play and turn it into whatever, then I'm gonna be able to basically find kids that want to understand, what's this like? What's that experience like? And then they'll express it in their own way. So you saw Trayshawn earlier. I would love to see Trayshawn's spontaneous excitement would come out in such a beautiful, amazing way, wouldn't it? It would be different than the Allen. You know, the Allen one, you got to put a piece of rope on and reel him in, because he's going to go high. You know, the Trayshawn version would be, boo, baby, right here. It would be awesome. You know, and then we could play together. You know, we'd be a whole orchestra, right? And you got Christian in the middle. It's awesome. It's awesome. But that's your original myth story. Go find that story. And
you're a good daughter with the Christian as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't forget her. Okay. Well, sounds. So has anybody else? Oh, okay. Amir's got a question. Go ahead, Amir.
Thank you.
Hi, Amir.
And
Guys, come on. Just tell him. You can do it.
it's Amir, it's just you and me. What do you got to tell me? Just tell me what you got to tell me. Ignore the rest. These are all adults. They don't hear anything anyway. Tell me what you got to tell me.
When it's something very special, tell him. It's very nice. Go on. Go on, he'll love to hear it. Go on, tell him. Go on, please.
That's not like you being shy.
Okay.
To tell, I think you should really tell him.
Hey, Amir. Hey, Amir. If it's not coming out right now, you promise you'll tell me later? Okay, so hold it, and then later when we talk, you remember, because I don't want to forget this moment. Can you make sure though you remember to tell me when we talk, just you and me? Okay, so this is our deal. So I'll get Amir's question, and later when Amir wants to tell me, he's going to hold it for me, and we're going to have we'll do it one-on-one. And these are just boring adults anyway. Don't worry about it. We're good.
Awesome. So what I got from the earlier conversation, it's so beautiful how we kind of end up on our personal stories, because it felt like the big fat monk story that you tell me. Every time I hear that story, I get goosebumps. So these tyrant, I think it's accurate to think that these tyrants are that like the representation of that big fat monk, and they are only there to make us to be able to breathe. Let me breathe, because then now before, otherwise we're becoming almost complacent, and when the tyrant is sitting on our chest and like, okay, now I'm like really getting out of breath, get off me. So that's when we take the action. So would that be accurate and safe to say that?
It is, and I don't want to interrupt you, but let me just add one little piece, because what's really nice is to have something real and tangible on the ground that you can kind of tie into, because a lot of what we've done is I've talked a lot, so it's a lot of this has been all concepts. When I speak, everything's a concept, and so how does it live, on the ground? So I had a beautiful conversation this morning, and we talked about the sense of who we are. And so I bet you everybody on this call, if you think about it, I'm 67, and when I sit here, I don't feel any different than I was when I was 5. In other words, there's a part of me that's the same. I can feel that part, right? It's there. This has always been me. I've always been here. So that's where, if you can find that part in yourself, that's called awareness, by the way. So what that is pure awareness, just the part of you that's always there. We all know what that feels like. When I bring this up, there's never anybody who won't go, oh yeah, I know that. This is me, I'm here. The story's changed, the body's changed, all of that's changed, right? So you can see the changes that happen, but there's the piece of you that's you. So Preet is Preet and Alan's Alan. And what you don't know is that actually it's the same thing. The Preet and the Alan and that part, that awareness is the same thing, but it's okay. For now, just hold it as that's who you are. You're just that awareness, right? So whenever you want to get out of the drama of life, you feel like you're being pulled into those stories that are out there and you're losing that sense of who you are, go to this feeling right now that you're having. If you'll stop for a second and go, what's the part of me that's always me? And go sit in that, and just sit in that place. That's all you got to do. And what you'll see, if you'll just sit there, is that the mind may want to still go out and play in that story, but actually you'll just start to see it, right? It's doing its thing. And that's just for me, that's the Alan story doing its thing. Fair enough. Because if I sit in the Alan that's always there, I can see that other Alan's over there doing it. The story's playing itself just like a movie does or a MP4 does. It just plays itself. It's nothing to do with me. That story happens by itself. It sits out there and rolls through. But the Alan who's Alan is just here. Always the same thing. That's always available to you. That's who you really are. All you have to do is go sit in it, right? Stand in it, sit in it. That's what meditation of all kinds is meant to have you sit in that place, right? Now we make it complicated and all the rest of it and the way that humans do in the knowledge world, but the reality is it's just the simplicity of who you are, the one that's always been there and will always be there. That's who you are. Go there, use it. It's been given to you. Go there, stay there, sit there, right? So all you've seen happen in this meeting is that we started off with a conversation about all that stuff out there. And it felt more complicated and harder to understand and harder to get our arms around it. And as we talked, the love that we all share started to kind of just sit there, and that love leads you to a place where it's just you, just sitting there, right? And so you notice the meeting, it got a lot quieter, right? All the way down to where Amir, you know, believe it or not, what you just saw was a child who was living so much in his heart that the speaking wasn't going to happen for him. It'll happen later when we talk, right?
Yes.
So the beauty of it was, at the very end, we have a child who's the closest one in the crowd to that beginning spot of consciousness itself, who there he lives, right? And his contribution was to not say anything so we could all feel that place, right? And you can always go there. So thank you, Amir, by the way. If Amir's still on with this, just a huge thank you for taking us to where we all wanted to have this end anyway.
Can you just, the one last thing, can you just give us one pointer? How can we, so there's one thing we understood that's where we're going to get. Like it seems we're all going to assimilate everything you shared and integrate it into our being. And is there a practice that you do, like certain type of meditation, so we can kind of integrate that in a practical way in our life naturally? Just one last thing, and then we close.
No problem. So what happens is that the first thing you do is you go to your original story. And when you go to your original story, you believe that the original story is still being lived by you, this separate thing called you, right? So a lot of times, and I don't have one here, I wish I did, but I'll hold a cup up. Can everybody imagine I have a Starbucks cup in my hand? So when you look at a cup, imagine that cup is you, and imagine that there's a big table here, and that you are the cup, and I'm moving you around on the table called life, right? Now, when I take the cup and I show it to you, you're going to see there's a bottom on this cup, right? So that cup is self-contained, right? It's a self-contained cup. It's separate from the place, and it moves around. And what we do is we try to move it into the place where that original story is. Now, when we find that place where the original story is, we leave the cup there, right, and have it live its original story. And eventually what happens is you pick the cup up and you notice the bottom is gone, because what's happening is that the world that we live in and the cup become one thing, and the energy from the world just moves through the cup. It's just part of what's going on. Now, we all think that all the cups have bottoms. They really don't. But until we know that they don't, then we need a practice. There'll come a time where that story just gets lived with no bottom on the cup. And when that gets lived that way, then there is no longer a practice, because every moment is a meditation. Until then, find the story. So to me, I'll use Christian as an example, because I know he won't care. The spontaneous excitement or whatever it is that he expresses in that original story, his practice is find that everywhere you can see it. Right? So I know you, for instance, right? So Preet has a habit of elegant thinking, but what she really is a big heart. So those two like to battle each other. And so the original myth story, the sweet little girl from Punjab, right, who's all heart, who's all this energy flows on all of us, right, somewhere along the line decided that her elegant mind needed to somehow or another be involved in more than it does. So where am I going to send her? I'm going to send her to find all of the places that the little Punjabi Preet lives in, that she can find in the world where that heart connects. That's what I'm going to have her do. Look for that, look for that, look for that, right? And then the headpiece will find its place. It has a beautiful place. Just right now, it's a little out of balance. So the practice is, what's in my heart for you? What's in my heart? Where do I find that? The practice for Christian is, where is this kind of emergence of this essence that he is, right? He's got his prop. He can go around and look for checkerboard shoes and see what that, whatever it is, go find it out there. So the practice is just to find it, find that story, and see and live that energy. Because once we locate it, we're moving the cup around. At one point in time, that cup's going to go right where it belongs. And then we'll work on having you see that there really is, you think there's a bottom to the cup, and we'll work on not seeing the bottom when we get there.
Right.
But first find your place.
Beautiful. Yes, I've also experienced that when we bring some sort of disciplines, and it almost becomes like a dogma. So I always think meditation is a medication. So right, as you said, like, so we do meditation. So it's like a soul's medication. So if you don't need the medication, don't take it. So right. So I also think all disciplines are for that reasons as well. But then it also becomes like a dogma if we start to think in certain way. But I'm so grateful to have.
Okay.
Were you going to say something else? Oh, right.
I was going to say the Buddha used to say, the last thing you do when you see me on the road is kill me. And what he was trying to say was, don't use me as a crutch. So meditation is great, but don't use it as a crutch. Kill your meditation when there's no more meditating to do.
Right. Beautiful. Oh my gosh. I absolutely love every word you uttered. Is like, it was like a nourishing, like a sun rays coming towards me. So thank you ever so much. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Like last a bit of what they got? Anything? Paolo wants to share something. Go ahead, Paolo.
Just first of all, thank you everyone for coming on today, and thank you Auntie Preet for organising all of this, and also Uncle Chris. I've really had an amazing time, not only just listening to Alan, but also not Alan, I mean Abuelo. Not only just listening to Abuelo, but understanding all the words that he's been saying, because it's one thing. There's a thing between listening, and then there's another thing between understanding what someone has been saying. So I've understood both. So I've understood all of that you said and listened to all that you said, and I've not just listened, but I've taken all of it in. All that you said around storytelling, how to tell your story, how to bring up yourself. I just learned so much from all the words that you have said, but also all of the different questions that have been asked around, because there's one thing between learning what someone has said, and also one thing between learning what someone has asked. So just thank you so much for just allowing me giving me that opportunity to learn, because really and truly I felt that this was a lecture, but not any lecture. This was one of the most funnest lectures that I've ever listened to and taken part in. So just thank you so much. You've really given, like, not only just me, but everyone just to be themselves in this space, and just to learn so much about how they can tell their story, not anyone's story, but their story. Just thank you so much for giving us that opportunity. Thank you.
Can I just invite last bit my mom? Mama, अपने आप ਨੂੰ unmute कर लो. Alan ਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਨੂੰ hello कहो. अपनी जो light जगा सकते हो light जगा दो, because थोड़ा नेरा पिया. So mom's just gonna say hello to everybody, because my mom is so beautiful, and she is in an environment where people, it's not supportive environment for spirituality. That's my beautiful mommy. She's waking up early in the morning to see us. Mama, ਸਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ hello ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ, ਦੇਖੋ phone ਤੇ. Hello? ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੁਣ. ਮਮਾ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੇਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ. Right. ਸਾਰੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ hello ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਆ. Wave ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੇ. Well done.
Hello.
Yeah. She bless you, mom. Cool. All right. All right. Blessing. God bless everybody. Thank you ever so much for your time and having this satsang with us today with Alan. Thank you. Bye bye.
See you. Bye everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, man.